Hey y'all, my name is Pastor Ethan, and I serve as the pastor here at Crawford Road Baptist Church. I'm so thankful you found this video. Whether you're about to watch a sermon or a Bible study, I'm so glad that you would like to study God's Word with us. I do want to say that as important as it is to be studying and using online videos, it's even more important to be growing in your faith connected to a local church. So please make sure to stay plugged into your local church, or join us on Sunday morning at 10:30 if you don't already have a local church. But don't let a video like this make you think that it's a replacement for gathered worship. That is really important. But I do hope that this video will benefit you and help you grow in your faith. God bless, and thank you for watching.
Well, I wonder if anybody has ever accused you of procrastinating before. Any of you ever procrastinated? Just this morning. There you go. For some of us, procrastination is probably one of the main adjectives other people would use to describe all of our life. For some of us, maybe we don't procrastinate all the time, but we certainly have moments of procrastination. For example, I personally think that the best day to start Christmas shopping is December 24th. My wife disagrees with that strongly. I figure, why not wait until the last minute? And she says because 2-day shipping means that if you order it on the 24th, it still won't come by Christmas. Alas, most of you will probably side with her. But I will be at CVS at midnight on December 24th, so if you want to come, the candy aisle is stocked, I promise. But there's, gift cards. Hey, everybody can use a gift card. That's what I'm saying. But there's all kinds of procrastination in our life, too, beyond Christmas, For those of us who are married men, there's the infamous honey-do list, where your wife asks you to do something, and you're like, yeah, I'll fix that, and then 2 years later, it's still broken. You're like, why did you call a plumber? Because I asked you to fix that 3 years ago. I was going to fix it this weekend. Laundry is fun, Sometimes we remember to put it in the washing machine, and sometimes we remember to put it in the dryer. But a lot of times, don't you go to grab that shirt, and you're like, where is it? And it's in the dryer, and you just live out of your dryer instead of your clothes being in your dresser. Groceries are fun. Groceries are a fun one. You think, man, I really got to go to the store. And then you just kind of get caught up in something, and you're like, no, I got enough milk. And then all of a sudden, there's no food. Or my favorite one is gas. When you think, oh, the tank is low, and then the little gas light comes on, I got 40 miles, I'm good. And you're 45 miles away from a gas station. There's all sorts of things, in our life that we procrastinate on, and a lot of them can be funny, or at least they're funny later if they're not funny in the moment. But as we look at God's Word this morning, procrastination was on my mind, because one of the things that we can do in our life is not only procrastinate on things like laundry and groceries and the honey-do list or Christmas shopping. A lot of times we can fall into the trap of spiritual procrastination. We can procrastinate with our spiritual lives. We can think that we have all the time in the world to become more strong in our relationship with Jesus. And what we've been learning over the last several weeks from Matthew 24, as Jesus talks about his return, is that we don't know the day or the hour that he's going to come back. We know that if we are saved by his grace, that we have eternity to look forward to. But as far as this life is concerned, technically speaking, we have decades to live, but we're not guaranteed to be able to live tomorrow, and we just don't know, not only in our life, but also when he's going to return. And so spiritual procrastination is actually a very serious problem, and it's a big trap that we can all fall into. And Jesus, in this conversation in Matthew 25, he's still in the conversation with the disciples about his return that we've studied from chapter 24. He ends that conversation on this Tuesday night of the last week of his life with 3 parables, 2 that we're going to look at today and 1 that we'll look at next week. And these 2 today really highlight the danger of spiritual procrastination. They highlight for us the fact that we don't have the time that we think we do, and we cannot wait until tomorrow to pursue spiritual growth. In fact, the main idea of the whole message is that because we don't know the day or the hour of Jesus' return, that we should avoid spiritual procrastination altogether. We don't know when Jesus is going to come back. So we should be people who we don't even bother. We avoid spiritual procrastination altogether. How do we do that? How do we be people who are spiritually growing and not spiritually procrastinating? Well, Jesus gives us the answer through these two parables, these two teaching lessons. And he tells us that we need to be wise and faithful. The theme of the first parable is wisdom, and the theme of the second parable is faithfulness. And through wisdom and faithfulness, Jesus teaches us how to be people that, instead of being spiritual procrastinators, we're people that grow in our spiritual walk. So this first parable, I read the first couple verses for us just a moment ago, and it talks to us about wisdom. If we're going to avoid spiritual procrastination while we wait on Jesus to return, that means that we need to wisely take practical steps to foster our spiritual growth. If you're going to avoid spiritual procrastination, then every day you need to wisely take practical steps that foster your spiritual growth. Take one step every day, and you'll get closer to Jesus. Take no steps at all, and you will remain where you are and potentially slide backwards. And so as we look at that, Jesus uses these parable here of these 10 different virgins to describe for us what wisdom looks like. Now, we read also of a groom. Jesus is describing a wedding. And in the ancient Near Eastern world Jesus lived in, weddings were over about 7 days, a big celebration. And there were different moments along the way of different celebrations over the course of 7 days. And so what's happening is these 10 virgins are what we would today consider bridesmaids. And they're going to meet the groom, and then they'll walk with the groom to a different part of the wedding ceremony. And they go out at night, and they have to take lamps with them, because Jesus' day and age, nobody had lights on their cell phones or street lights, and so you had to take a lamp. Whether that was a literal lamp that you held like this, or a torch that had an oil-soaked rag on it, could go either way. But the point is, you had to take your own light source with you. Otherwise, the path would have been pitch black. No lights on the street. And they were waiting long enough that they had to take extra oil. The lights would not have lasted through the night. You can think about holding a torch that has an oil-soaked rag on it. At some point, the oil burns up and your light source is gone. But if you have extra oil, you can add that to the torch and continue to have the light with you. And so there's 5 of these virgins who take oil with them, and 5 who don't. And then if you look down at verse 3, when the foolish took their lamps, they didn't take that oil with them, but the wise ones took oil in flasks with their lamps. They were prepared. There are 5 wise and 5 foolish, and the difference is whether or not they were prepared for waiting for a long time. That way their light wouldn't go out. And we see in verse 5, it was good that they brought extra oil. When the groom was delayed, that word delayed literally means it took a really long time. They began to wonder, is he even going to show up at all? In fact, they became drowsy and fell asleep. And yet in verse 6, it says, in the middle of the night, there was a shout, "Here's the groom! Come out and meet him! Finally he got here!" Nobody had the ability to text, "Hey, I'm on my way." You're just waiting, and all of a sudden, "Hey, he's come." And then in verse 7 it says, all 10 of the virgins got up and trimmed their lamps. In other words, they figured out how much oil they had. They got their lighting situation squared away. But verse 8 says, the foolish ones said to the wise ones, "Hey, give us some of your oil because our lamps are going out." They didn't have extra. They had fallen asleep. It had been a long time. Their light source was gone. They could see by the light of the wise virgins' lamps, but they couldn't see from their own. "Now, you got oil, give me some." But verse 9 says, the wise ones answered, "No, there won't be enough for us and for you. Go instead to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." You might think, man, that's a little selfish, right? If you have extra oil, why wouldn't you share? That way everybody can have light. But if you notice, they didn't say, "Hey, we don't like you, we don't want to share." Verse 9, they said, "Look, if we give our oil to you, then all of us will run out because we don't have enough oil for 10 lamps. We only have enough oil for 5. And if we give some to you, then all of us are going to be in the dark. We're all going to miss the groom, and we can't have that happen." but go to the store, buy more. Run to Walmart, as it were. So verse 10 says, when they had gone to buy some, the groom arrived. The 5 virgins are there, ready to meet him. And those who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. But later the rest of the virgins also come, and they knew probably where to go, so they knock on the door. Master, master, open up for us. We're here. Sorry we're late. The checkout line at Walmart was ridiculous, but we're here. But he replied to them, truly I tell you, I don't know you. Jesus ends by saying, therefore be alert, because you don't know the day or the hour. He's referring to when he comes back. Verse 12 is kind of weird because the customs of Jesus' time would have been to have opened the door even for latecomers, right? You don't have Apple Watch that can tell you exactly what time it is and when to show up. There would be a little bit of grace for a time delay. But Jesus tells the parable the way he does to emphasize the point that he's making, which is there in verse 13. Be alert because you don't know the day or the hour. He's saying, you don't know, 12 disciples, when I'm going to come back. So you need to always be ready. And we've talked about that a lot in the last few weeks. Be alert, live ready. Otherwise, you'll be like these 5 virgins who didn't have the oil they needed and missed coming into the kingdom of heaven. And what's Jesus doing? He's drawing a distinction. He's saying, look, there are disciples who are wise and there are disciples who are unwise. And he's calling us to be wise. But what makes these virgins wise or not? Whether or not they had extra oil, whether or not they prepared. Some of them took a practical step to make sure that they had what they needed while they were waiting. And some of them did not. And you'll notice that those who missed the groom because making up for their procrastination didn't get to go into the wedding. The virgins didn't go into the wedding because they had oil. When they got to the door, it wasn't like, oh, look, you guys are prepared. You guys are super type A people. Well, congratulations. Based on your type A mentality, you get to come in. No, why do they get to come in? Hey, you're with the groom. You're with the groom. He needs to be here, and you're with him. So you get to come in because you're with him. And when the others show up, why don't they get to? I don't know who you are. Are you a bridesmaid? I don't know. You're not with the groom. I don't know who you are. And that's what Jesus is communicating. When we stand before the Lord, whether it's upon our natural death or his return, and our being caught up in the clouds to meet him, our entrance into the kingdom of heaven isn't about whether or not we were prepared or religious. It's about whether or not we were with him. Were we with the groom? The groom is representing Jesus. Were we disciples that were with Jesus? Did we turn from our sin and place our faith in him because he's the only one who could save us? Were we ready? Were we looking at him? And in our daily life, I think Jesus has a lot of application. You know, there's a salvation and evangelism application for the parable. Hey, make sure to turn from your sin and place your faith in Jesus because he is the only one who can get you into heaven. And so, of course, if you've never trusted in Jesus, make today the day that you ask him to forgive you of all your rebellion against God and to be saved. But for those of us who are Christians already, there's a lot of application, I think, about our life. We don't have a lot of time. I mean, we think we do. You know, theoretically, I've got 30 years, I've got 50 years, I've got 10 years, I've got time, tomorrow. Today's busy. Thanksgiving is coming up. I'm going to be a little stressed this week, but, I can focus on Jesus. Well, okay, December's going to also be crazy because you got Christmas and New Year. But in January, I got time. That's when I'll start to focus on following Jesus. That's when I'll start to do whatever it is God's convicting me of in my heart. But we don't know the day or the hour of the Lord's return. And we don't know when he's going to come back. We don't actually know that we have the next moment, let alone the next day. And so Jesus is saying, don't procrastinate in your spiritual life. Make sure that you are following him today. make sure you're following him today. And so, what is that in your life? Most of us probably have areas in our spiritual life that we think, yeah, I think I'm doing okay right now. I'm strong in this. And we also probably have areas where we could grow. Don't procrastinate your growth. Don't say, I'll handle my growth once the holidays die down. I'll handle my growth once the season of my life that's busy is over. I'll handle my growth later. No, handle it today. Pray today. Read the Bible today. If God is convicting you about tithing, start making financial goals in your budget today. If God's convicting you about serving in the church, don't say, I'll eventually get around to it. You don't know the day or the hour. You might not get around to it. Figure out how you can serve today. Make sure that you're growing today. Tell that person in your life that you know you need to share the gospel with the gospel. Share it with them today. Talk to your kids about Jesus today. Talk to your grandkids about Jesus today. Whatever it is that you know that God has put in your life where you can grow, don't procrastinate, because you are not guaranteed the next moment. But there's also another lesson that's really crucial in this parable about this idea of wisdom and taking practical steps every day. You don't have to conquer the world of your spiritual faith. Just one step. Right? You don't have to go from no praying to 5,000 hours of praying every day. Just start at a 5-minute interval and go from there. But you notice what happens. The wise virgins and the foolish virgins are in different groups. And the foolish virgins, they can't get in. They can't borrow the oil from the wise ones. Did you notice that happened? And what this shows us about our righteousness and our faith and our life and our spiritual growth is that when it comes to your eternity, you cannot ride the coattails of somebody else's righteousness. You cannot borrow oil, you cannot borrow righteousness from someone else in your life. A lot of people fall into this trap and they think, well, my church is a good church, so as long as I'm at the church, when I stand before God, my church attendance will balance out the scales and I'll get to be with him for eternity. I'm married to a godly person, and so their righteousness will rub off on me enough. And that when I stand before the Lord, it'll be okay because I can kind of skate in behind my spouse. I can skate in behind my parents, my grandma, who's godly. I can borrow somebody else's righteousness. That's not how this works. When you stand before the Lord, he's looking at your life, not your spouse or your parent or your fellow church members' lives. I can't get you into heaven, and you can't get me into heaven. When you stand to give an account of your life to the Lord, I'm not going to be next to you, and neither is your mom or your dad or your spouse or anybody else from our church. You're going to be talking with the Lord. And far too often people think, man, I can borrow righteousness. I can ride in on someone else's coattails. You can't. There's one person whose righteousness and goodness and perfection can get you into heaven, and that is Jesus. You will spend an eternity with the Lord based upon whether or not you asked him to forgive you of your rebellion, your sin, and whether or not he credited your account with his righteousness. So you need to go to him and not bank on someone else. That's what this parable teaches us. But it also teaches us that maybe you're not the person who's trying to get into eternity on someone else's coattails. But I think some of us have people in our life that are trying to get into heaven on our coattails. That when we think, like, yeah, you know, this person, my spouse or my child or my friend or my coworker or my sibling, they think that my righteousness is good enough, and they don't take the gospel and faith seriously because they think having my last name or knowing my address is going to be enough to get me into heaven, and so that's fine. Sometimes we don't talk to them about their need to repent because we're concerned about whether or not telling them the truth. You can't get in based on me. You need to take the gospel seriously. We don't want to hurt their feelings. I tell you what, It does not hurt someone's feelings to share the gospel. It does hurt someone else to know that they can't get into heaven based on something you did. They need to trust Jesus. They're relying on you in a way they shouldn't, and you don't tell them. That will harm someone. What won't harm them, even if they don't respond in a way that, thank you. They might be grumpy, but what won't harm them is telling them, you need to trust in Jesus because he's the only one who can pull you in. And you don't know the day or the hour, so you can't wait around to get serious with the Lord. Stop riding my coattails. That might be something that some of us need to tell people in our life because we don't know the day or the hour. And whether you're not a Christian and this parable applies to you because you need to just trust in Jesus now, or you are a Christian and God's maybe putting something on your life where you think to yourself, I'll do that, I'll repent of that sin, I'll practice that spiritual discipline, I'll grow later. You don't have later. You're not guaranteed later. Grow today. Take wise, practical steps today. But Jesus not only tells us that to avoid spiritual procrastination means why we take our day. There's a second parable. And he also says, look, if you're going to avoid spiritual procrastination, you need to live with wisdom. But you also need to live with faithfulness. You need to be a faithful person. Avoiding spiritual procrastination while we wait on Jesus to return means faithfully stewarding all that God gives us. Let's look at this parable with the talents. Verse 14. It was just like a man, Jesus' return, the coming of heaven. It's just like a man about to go on a journey. He called his own servants and entrusted his possessions to them. The master in this parable is a reference to God, and the servants are a reference to us. The word entrust means that you take something that you personally vested in, something you personally care about, and you hand it over to someone else to take care of. Psalm 21:4 says that the whole earth and the fullness thereof is the Lord's. Everything you have in your life has been given to you by God to steward. Sure, have you had to work hard to earn things? Of course, but you have to remember that even in that, God has rewarded and blessed, but it all belongs to him, and he's given it to you to steward. None of the things that we have, material or relational, are ours because we're intrinsically awesome. They're ours because God has given them to us to steward. And so this master entrusts these possessions. Verse 15, to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, depending on each one's ability. Then he went on a journey. Immediately the man who had received 5 talents went, put them to work, and earned 5 more. In the same way, the man with 2 earned more. But the man who received 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. The master these talents. Now, a talent is an amount of money. By our best guess, it's in between $800,000 and $960,000. It's 1 talent. Basically, just shy of $1 million. So, regardless of whether or not you have 1, 2, or 5, it's a pile of money that each one of these people have been given, each according to his ability. Jesus' point is, we all have different stuff. God's given all of us different things to steward. And it's not really so much ours to figure out, well, do I have 5? Do I have 2? Do I have 1? I'm jealous that I only have 2. I think I deserve 5. The point of the parable is you've been given something that God cares about to steward. What do you have that you're supposed to steward? That word put to work, when the man with the 5 and the 2 talents put them to work, they didn't just kind of invest it and earn a passive income. Put to work means they went to town trying to gain more for their master. They were faithful, trustworthy, dependable, everyday laboring so that their master would have more than what he gave them. And this teaches us, as a brief side note, why the sin of jealousy and coveting is so bad. Coveting is wanting something that someone else has so bad that you fixate on it. You get angry that they have it and you don't. You begin to wish that they would lose it and that you could gain it. Coveting isn't, hey, I need a new car, and I'm going to look at my friends and figure out which one of them has the best minivan. Coveting is, hey, I want a thing that I think I deserve, and I see that someone else has it, and it makes me angry that I don't have it and they do. And I want it. And I hope their Christmas is bad because they don't have it. I hope that, go get a cold, loser. I want something that you don't have. Or that you have and I don't. That can be physical, that can be something in a relationship. But this parable is saying that's so sinful because God didn't give you what other people have. He gave you what you have. Why? Because he made you and he knows you and he knows what your ability is, and what you have is yours to have from him. So stop him bad and that he can't give you things, and that he should have given you something else. When we question what God does, we question his character, and that's a sin. God, you didn't give me enough. How dare you not? I want this. It says, God, you're not good enough to know me enough to give me what I need. Don't question it. Don't be jealous. Don't covet. Instead, say, all right, this is what I have, both in material goods. What do I now do with all that God has given me? Am I going to put them to work, or am I going to dig a hole in the ground and bury it? Now, that technically was a safe way for possessions to be stored back then. Nobody had like biometric vaults that could scan your eyeballs to keep your valuable possessions safe. So if you buried something in the ground, you didn't tell anybody else where you buried it, you could go back later and unbury it and you'd be good to go. But here's the thing. The master didn't want the people to bury it. He wanted them to put it to work. He entrusted something valuable to them. And we know that's the case because if you look at verse 19, you see how he responds when he comes back. After a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 talents approached, presented 5 more talents, and said, Master, you gave me 5 talents. See, I have earned 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. Ironic to call multiple millions of dollars a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Share your master's joy. The man with 2 talents also approached. He said, Master, you gave me 2 talents. See, I have earned 2 more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Share your master's joy. The grammar here is not to be passed up. The master's not just saying, good job, move on, next, good job, move on, next. It's not cold. When the master sees how these 2 servants have stewarded his possessions, there's a smile on his face, his voice. Good job, man. I'm proud of you. You did so good with that I'm going to increase your responsibility. Share my joy. It's like when a little kid colors a picture for his mom or his dad or his grandparent, and he shows them that picture, and the parent puts it on the fridge because they're so happy about it. That joy that fills that little kid to see their scribbles on the fridge. Share that joy. I'm so proud of you. But then, in verse 23, or 24, we see the 1 talent man. The man who had received 1 talent also approached him and said, Master, I know you. You're a harsh man. In other words, you're merciless. You're a big, mean guy. Reaping where you haven't sown and gathering where you haven't scattered seed. You take advantage of other people. You're rich because you messed people over. So I was afraid when you gave me your stuff and went off and hid your talent in the ground. See, look, here's what's yours. Now his master replies, and his master doesn't say, you're right, I was harsh, or you're wrong, I'm not harsh. His master simply says, you evil, meaning morally degenerate, and lazy, meaning good for nothing, servant. You morally degenerate, good for nothing punk. If you knew that I reap where I haven't sown and gathered where I haven't scattered, then you should have deposited my money with the bankers, and I would have received my money back with interest when I returned. The master's not saying that he is or isn't harsh. He's simply saying, well, if you really were afraid of me, if you really thought I was a bad guy, you should have at least put my money in the bank and I could have earned a passive income. Instead, you buried it in the ground, which shows that you weren't really afraid of me, because if you were afraid, you would have earned something so that I wouldn't have had wrath for you when I got back. You were lazy. You were morally degenerate. And when I got back, instead of owning that, you wanted to blame me. That's not how this works. In verse 28, he says, take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have more than enough. But from the one who does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw this good-for-nothing servant into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. A phrase that Jesus always uses when describing hell. And Jesus is comparing the faithfulness of the two versus the unfaithfulness of the one. The issue is not about how much money the servants made the master. The issue is about, did they steward faithfully? Were they trustworthy with what the master gave them? Or were they lazy with it and did nothing? And whether or not we faithfully steward the things that God gives us matters. As we've already discussed, our works don't get us into heaven. The point of this parable isn't to say you better work hard or you should be scared that God won't save you. You will enter heaven solely on the perfect work of Jesus Christ. And whether or not you've asked him to apply his perfection to your life. But this is a statement that says, man, God cares about how you live. To understand the gospel means to understand that Jesus is calling you not only to the hope of eternity, but to a life with him now. And how you live, how you steward what he's given you matters. And just like all of these servants, when your life ends, your account will be settled. Hebrews 9:27 says that it is appointed once for a man to die and then face judgment. You will pass or fail that judgment based on whether or not you have turned from your sin and trusted in Jesus. And so, if you have never done that, trust in Jesus today. Ask him to forgive you for your rebellion against God, to save your soul. Make today the day, during the song of response, the salvation day for you. But Christian, remember that you also will give an account to God of how you've lived your life. And it doesn't matter if you have 5 talents, 2 talents, or 1 talent. What matters is God gave you something. Did you steward it faithfully? Or did you bury it and your head in the ground and wait for him to come back? Were you faithful, meaning trustworthy and dependable, or were you lazy and evil with the things God gave you, both big and small? But you think about it like this. Matthew 12:36 through 37 says that even things as little as our words are given to us by God and are to be stewarded. We will be accountable for them. Matthew 12:36 through 37, Jesus says, I tell you that on the day of judgment, people will have to account for every careless word they speak. By your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned. Jesus says a part of your judgment day is that every single word that comes out of your mouth, you've got to explain to the Lord. You are on the hook for every word that you speak. Do you steward your words faithfully, recognizing that you have to tell Jesus why you spoke them? Or do you just flippantly run your mouth, acting like it's no big deal what you say? This isn't just about what happens when you stub your toe and whether or not you say a bunch of cuss words, although we could all probably do better about what comes out of our mouth when we stub our toe. This is about gossip. This is about dirty joking. This is about slander. This is about complaining. Every word you are accountable for. Jesus didn't have social media, but we do. And the words that you type onto your computer screen and your emails and your text messages also count as words for which you will be accountable. Every single one. Do you steward them? Do you even think in your day about the fact you're responsible to steward your speech? Every aspect of our life is given to us by God on purpose. And we just have to ask, why do I have it, and what am I supposed to do to steward it well? It would be easy for us to look at any number of things. You know, what do you do in your job? What do you do with your kids? What do you do in your marriage? Every moment, God has given you what you have, the money in your bank account, the skills that you have, all of it. He's given it to you to steward. And each one of us needs to ask, am I being the 5-talent or 2-talent guy? Or am I acting a lot more like the 1-talent guy? Who am I acting like? I think another helpful part of application is retirement. For a lot of people in our church, retirement is something that they're already in. You're already in, or you're really close probably to it. And retirement's a funny thing because it's not just the last few years of your life. For most people, if you retire, especially in between 62 and 67, you've got at least 10 years, but probably 15, maybe even 20 or 25 years of life. Retirement can sometimes be almost a second career in its length. And our world and our culture says, man, when you get to retirement, and by the way, you should invest money now so that you can retire when you're 35 or 45 or 50. Don't wait until you can draw your Social Security. And retirement is about you, your time to pursue your hobbies. You can travel. You can do what you want. It's great to have hobbies. You should cross-stitch or go antique shopping or hunt or play golf. Those are great things, but we have to give an account of our time. If you're at retirement age or you're close to it, you have a lot of wisdom that you've learned, primarily probably through the school of hard knocks, that people like me who have a couple more years until retirement is remotely a reality need to know. You've got wisdom to share, life to give to your kids and grandkids and to the church and the kingdom of heaven. Retirement can be a time where you do more to build God's kingdom than you ever thought conceivable or imaginable, because you're in a spot of some financial stability, maybe a fixed income, but nonetheless, you probably a little bit more stable than you were in your 20s, eating ramen every day. You got time and you got wisdom. You have gifts and that are significant and huge and important, and they matter, and you matter. And how you steward the last season of your life matters. Your golden years should be golden because you're thinking about streets of gold, not bars of gold in your bank account. Your golden years should be golden because you're thinking about the streets of gold, not bars of gold in your bank account. And that should be something that everybody aims for, regardless of where you find yourself on the timeline of your life. Will Jesus find you faithful? Because you have to give an account to him of your life. And Jesus ends this by saying, you just don't know. You could think, right? A guy like me, right? I turned 30 in January, and I could be like, man, I've got however many decades left. I don't. I could change the church sign on Wednesday and get hit by a bus. I don't know. I hope that I can change the church sign without bruise. But I don't know. I'm not guaranteed, and neither are you. Are you wise and are you faithful every day? If Jesus did return right now, and you had to give an account of your life, are you sitting there thinking, oh, I don't know, I need to clean up the books? Or you think, no, I'm ready. They're in order and he can review. Probably for all of us, right? Jesus says, live with the end in mind. Since we don't know either the day or the hour of Jesus' return, we should avoid spiritually procrastinating, which means wisely taking practical steps to foster our spiritual growth every day and faithfully stewarding all that God gives us. The grass withers and the flower fades, but this, the word of our Lord, remains forever. Would you pray with me? Lord God, we come to you thankful that you love us and that you care for us, that every day of our lives is written by your hand and that